The sun hung like a molten coin in the vast azure sky over the jagged spires of Eldrath, casting long, dancing shadows across the obsidian plateau that served as the heart of the Dragon Council's ancient eyrie. Warm thermals rose from the volcanic vents far below, carrying the faint scent of sulfur and wild mountain herbs, while distant waterfalls roared like eternal guardians in the valleys. It was a day of fragile peace, where the wind whispered secrets through scales and stone alike. Three young dragon hatchlings tumbled across the smooth, sun-warmed rocks with the boundless energy only the very young possess. Myra, the smallest of the trio, gleamed with silver scales that caught the light like polished moonlight on fresh snow. Her eyes were bright pools of sapphire curiosity, wide and unblinking as she pounced on a fluttering butterfly that dared venture too close to the plateau's edge. "Look, look." She squeaked in her high, melodic voice, her tiny wings, still too weak for true flight, flapping frantically, sending little puffs of dust into the air. "It has wings too, but so fragile, I won't hurt it, I promise." Beside her, Thorn, with scales the deep crimson of smoldering embers, let out a playful roar that was more squeal than thunder. His body was stockier, built for the fires that already flickered faintly in his chest. He charged at a cluster of loose pebbles, headbutting them with glee, sending them scattering like frightened mice. "Rower, I'm the mighty flame wielder, fear my breath." A tiny puff of smoke escaped his nostrils, followed by a cough that made his siblings giggle. His golden eyes sparkled with mischief. But beneath the bravado was the innocent warmth of a child who believed the world was a grand adventure waiting to be conquered. Lurek completed the playful triad, his storm-gray scales shifting subtly with hints of electric blue when the sun hit them just right. Slender and agile even in his youth, he darted between his siblings with graceful leaps, his budding horns, small nubs barely protruding from his forehead, catching the breeze. "Wait for me," he called, his voice a soft rumble like distant thunder rolling over hills. He spread his membranous wings, catching a gust that lifted him an inch off the ground before he tumbled back down in a heap of laughter and tangled limbs. "One day I'll command the skis, lightning and rain will dance for me." Their parents watched from the shaded ledges above, massive forms coiled protectively yet allowing the young ones their freedom. The great matriarch Vera, Myra's mother, was a vision of ethereal beauty and power, her silver scales larger and more iridescent, etched with runes of ancient magic that glowed faintly in the light. Her eyes, deep amethyst, softened with maternal pride as she observed her daughter. "They grow so fast," she murmured to her mate, a towering obsidian dragon named Korvath. "Yesterday they could barely walk the ledges, today they chase the wind itself." Korvath, Thorn and Lurak's sire in the shared clutch, rumbled in agreement, his deep voice vibrating through the stone. "Let them play, Vera. The world is harsh enough without us clipping their wings too soon, but keep watch, the lowlands stir again." His gaze drifted toward the distant human kingdom of Valoria, visible as a hazy patchwork of fields and spires on the horizon. Alliances were fragile things, woven from necessity rather than trust. Unbeknownst to the dragons, a delegation from Valoria was already ascending the treacherous mountain paths. Lord Commander Harlan Voss led the procession, a tall man in gleaming plate armor etched with the golden lion of his house. His face was sharp and angular, framed by a neatly trimmed beard streaked with premature gray from years of battlefield command. At 35, he carried the weight of ambition like a second sword at his hip. Flanking him were his captains, stern warriors with weathered faces, and a contingent of 50 elite soldiers, their boots kicking up dust as they navigated the final switchbacks. Harlan's mind raced with calculations. The orc hordes had grown bolder, raiding border villages with increasing ferocity. Valoria needed the dragons' aerial might, their devastating breath weapons, and their ancient magics to turn the tide. But dragons were proud, hoarding their power like misers with gold. "They sit on their peaks while good men bled," Harlan had confided to his second-in-command the night before, his voice low and edged with resentment. "We offer alliance, yet they demand terms as if we were beggars." The delegation emerged onto the plateau just as the hatchlings crested a small rise, still lost in their game. Myra spotted the humans first, skidding to a halt with wide eyes. "Papa, strangers with shiny skins," she called, her silver tail swishing excitedly. Thorn puffed out his chest, trying to look imposing despite his size, no larger than a large dog. Lurek hung back, slightly curious but cautious, his gray form blending subtly with the rocks. The Dragon Council convened swiftly. Elders from various clans gathered on the higher perches, ancient beings whose scales bore the scars of centuries. Vera and Korvath descended gracefully, their massive wings folding with a sound like snapping banners. Harlan bowed low, his armor creaking, but his eyes flicked with barely concealed envy at the sheer majesty before him. The air thickened with the scent of ozone and heat from the dragons. "Lord Commander Harlan Voss of Valoria," he announced, his voice carrying with practiced authority. "We come seeking the strength of Eldrath against the orc scourge that threatens all free peoples. Our swords are yours if your flames join our cause." Negotiations began under the open sky. The dragons listened with patient wisdom, their voices a harmonious blend of rumbles and melodic tones. They offered aid scouting flights, limited strikes, but refused to commit their full host without guarantees, protection of sacred nesting grounds, fair shares of any reclaimed magical artifacts, and an end to human encroachments on dragon territories. We have long memories, Vera said calmly, her silver form coiled like a living river of stars. Alliances must be built on mutual respect, not desperation. Harlan's jaw tightened. The terms chafed at his pride. Valoria had grown strong through conquest and cunning, bending to beasts felt like weakness. As talks dragged into the afternoon, a grand feast was prepared on neutral ground, a wide terrace overlooking the valleys. Tables groaned under roasted meats, fresh breads, exotic fruits from human orchards, and casks of spiced wine. The hatchlings, drawn by the smells and the novelty, were allowed to join under watchful eyes, their small forms perched on specially prepared cushions. What started as diplomacy soured with the wine. Harlan's soldiers, emboldened by drink and the sting of rejected demands, began to whisper. "Look at the little worms," one muttered, a burly sergeant with a scarred cheek. "All scales and no spine yet." Laughter rippled through the human ranks. It escalated quickly. Myra, innocently sniffing at a bowl of ripe berries, found herself the first target. A soldier accidentally knocked the bowl, sending sticky juice splashing across her silver scales. She squeaked in surprise, shaking her head as droplets flew. "Oh, it's cold and sweet, but sticky," the humans roared with laughter, one tossing a handful of overripe fruit that splattered against her side. Myra's eyes widened in confusion, her tiny wings fluttering defensively. "Why? I didn't do anything." Thorn, sensing his sister's distress, puffed up and stepped forward, a small flame sparking in his throat. "Leave her alone," but a captain tripped him with a casual boot, sending the red hatchling sprawling into a puddle of spilled mud and wine. His flames sputtered weakly, extinguished by the filth. Thorn shook himself, mud caking his beautiful crimson scales, his golden eyes filling with humiliated tears. It's not fair. I'm strong. I'll show you fire." The mockery peaked with Lurek. The smallest and most sensitive, he had been watching quietly, his storm gray body trembling slightly. A group of younger soldiers surrounded him, laughing as they produced paints from their kits, bright garish colors meant for marking banners. "Let's pretty up the little storm cloud," one jeered. They daubed humiliating symbols on his budding horns, crude human runes for weakling, pet, and coward. Lurek tried to pull away, but strong hands held him gently yet firmly enough to prevent escape. "Stop, please, it itches and burns." His voice cracked like a young thunderclap, small sparks dancing harmlessly on his scales. The dragon parent surged forward, roars shaking the plateau. Vera's eyes blazed with maternal fury. "Enough, you dare touch the innocent?" Korvath's wings unfurled, casting a shadow like an eclipse. The air grew heavy with the promise of fire and storm. Harlan raised his hands, feigning shock. "A mere jest among allies, noble dragons. Children play rough, surely your whelps understand humor." His smile was thin, eyes cold. Inside, satisfaction burned. The dragon's pride was wounded without open war. The council, fearing escalation with the orcs still a threat, swallowed the bile of humiliation. "Take your minimal aid and go," Vera said through gritted fangs, her voice laced with ice. "But know this, dragons forget nothing." As the humans descended the mountain, cheers and crude songs echoed back. The hatchlings huddled together that night in the family nest, a vast cavern warmed by geothermal vents and lined with soft furs and glowing crystals. Myra's silver scales were scrubbed clean, but her spirit felt tarnished. "Why did they laugh, Mama? Was I ugly?" Tears traced silvery paths down her cheeks. Thorn curled into a ball, his red hide still damp and stained. "I wanted to burn them, but I couldn't. I'm too small." His voice was muffled, heavy with shame. Lurek touched his horns gingerly, the paint long washed away but the memory lingering like a brand. "They made me feel broken, like the storms inside me are wrong." He nuzzled closer to his siblings, the three forming a tight knot of scales and warmth. Vera coiled around them, her massive form a living shield. Her voice was soft yet resonant, filled with ancient sorrow and steel. "Because fear makes small hearts cruel, my dears. Humans see our power and tremble, so they strike at what is vulnerable to feel tall. But remember this pain. Let it forge you. Dragons endure, dragons rise, and one day the skis will answer for every tear." Korvath added his deep rumble, his obsidian bulk blocking the cavern entrance like an unbreakable gate. "Sleep now, little flames and tempests. The world turns, and so shall the wheel of consequence." Outside, the stars wheeled overhead, indifferent yet eternal. The plateau lay quiet once more, but the air carried a subtle charge, a promise unspoken. The hatchlings' innocent laughter had been replaced by quiet sniffles, their playful tumbles by restless dreams of shining armor and mocking faces. Far below in Valoria, Harlan toasted his victory in the great hall of Ironhold Castle. Banners of the Golden Lion fluttered, and minstrels sang exaggerated tales of human cunning against the proud worms. No one spoke of the Bobby's tears. No one foresaw the regret that would one day swallow kingdoms whole. Yet in the nest high above, three small hearts beat with a new rhythm, not just of youth but of resolve. Myra whispered into the darkness, "One day will be big enough." Thorn nodded fiercely, a tiny spark reigniting in his chest. Lurak's eyes flashed with contained lightning. And the wind will remember our names. The night deepened, cradling the future in its silent wings. The humiliation had been sown. The harvest of regret waited patiently years away when Silver, Crimson, and Storm would reclaim the skis with interest paid in fire, thunder, and unyielding justice. The years unfurled over Eldrath like the slow, inexorable spread of storm clouds gathering on the horizon, dark, heavy with unspoken power, and pregnant with the promise of cataclysmic release. 2 decades had passed since that fateful day on the Obsidian Plateau, when laughter born of cruelty had scarred 3 innocent hatchlings. The mountain realm had changed little on the surface. The jagged spires still pierced the skis, geothermal vents continued to breathe warm sighs into the crisp air, and ancient winds carried the songs of dragons across valleys carved by time itself. Yet beneath the eternal stone, a quiet transformation had taken root in the hearts of Myra, Thorn, and Lurak. What began as tears of humiliation had crystallized into unyielding resolve, tempered by rigorous training, ancient rites, and the patient wisdom of their elders. Myra had blossomed into a creature of breathtaking elegance and lethal grace. Her silver scales, once small and delicate like scattered moonlight on fresh snow, now gleamed with an otherworldly iridescence that shifted between pearl and sapphire depending on the angle of the sun. Each scale was larger than a warrior's shield, edged with faint runes of protective magic that pulsed softly when she moved. Her wings, fully matured, spanned wider than the longest longship in Valoria's fleet, membranes so fine yet resilient that they could slice through gale force winds or cloak an entire village in shadow. Her sapphire eyes, once wide with childish wonder, now held the depth of ancient glaciers, cool, calculating, and capable of freezing an enemy with a single piercing glance. She had mastered the arts of illusion and swift strike, weaving spells that bent light around her form, making her appear as nothing more than a fleeting cloud until it was too late. Thorn's transformation was even more visceral. The stocky red hatchling who had once puffed futile smoke had become a living inferno incarnate. His crimson scales burned with an inner heat that made the air around him shimmer and dance, as if reality itself recoiled from his presence. Scars from countless training dives into volcanic craters marked his hide like badges of honor, faint black charring that only enhanced his terrifying beauty. His golden eyes smoldered constantly, twin furnaces that could ignite with a thought. His breath weapon had evolved into a devastating torrent of white-hot plasma, capable of reducing granite to glowing slag in seconds and turning armored battalions into screaming pillars of ash. Yet for all his raw power, Thorn retained a core of protective loyalty. He trained relentlessly not just for vengeance, but to ensure no young dragon would ever feel as powerless as he had on that humiliating day. Lurak, the once slender gray fledgling, had grown into a tempest-given form. His storm gray scales rippled with veins of electric blue that crackled faintly during moments of heightened emotion, like living lightning trapped beneath armor. His wings were vast sails optimized for riding the fiercest updrafts, allowing him to vanish into thunderheads and emerge as an avatar of destruction. His horns, no longer small nubs but majestic spiraling crescents etched with storm runes, channeled raw elemental fury. Lurak commanded the skis with terrifying precision, summoning hurricanes that could uproot ancient forests, directing bolts of lightning that struck with surgical accuracy, and weaving mists that concealed entire dragon flights from mortal eyes. His voice, once a soft rumble of uncertainty, now carried the weight of rolling thunder, capable of shattering eardrums or inspiring awe in allies. The three had trained together under the strict yet loving guidance of Vera and Korvath, alongside the full Dragon Council. Days blurred into nights of aerial maneuvers over the peaks, where Myra would dart through blizzards of her own creation, Thorn would dive-bomb into lakes of molten rock to hone his flame resistance, and Lurak would wrestle with wild tempests summoned from the ether. Evenings were spent in deep caverns, reciting the old lore of dragonkind, tales of ancient betrayals, of humans who once revered them as gods before fear turned to envy, and of the sacred duty to protect the innocent while remembering every slight. Power without memory is tyranny, Vera would intone, her silver form coiled around glowing crystal orbs that projected visions of the past. They struck at your vulnerability because they feared our strength. Let that fear now become their undoing. The humans of Valoria, meanwhile, had reveled in their perceived triumph. The orc hordes had been crushed in the years following the plateau incident, thanks in no small part to the limited dragon aid the council had grudgingly provided, enough to tip the scales without committing fully. King Harlan Voss, once Lord Commander, had ascended the throne in a blaze of self-proclaimed glory. His bards sang ballads of Harlan the Bold, tamer of worms, exaggerating the jest on the plateau into a legendary display of human wit that humbled the proud dragons. Taverns across Ironhold echoed with drunken retellings, how the whelps had been pelted, tripped, and painted, and how the great beasts had slunk away with tails between their legs. Harlan himself had grown corpulent with power and complacency. His once sharp face was now jowled, his beard streaked fully silver, but his eyes still burned with the same arrogant glint. He expanded Valoria's borders aggressively, sending expeditions into the foothills of Eldrath to mine rare crystals and reclaim territories he claimed were historically human. Dragon nesting grounds were encroached upon, ancient hordes subtly pilfered under the guise of trade. When dragon envoys protested, Harlan's court laughed it off. The worms remember their place after that little lesson with their bobbies, he would boast during feasts, raising a goblet of fine wine. They know better than to challenge the lion throne. His son, Prince Cedric, a cocky young man in his early 20s with his father's sharp features and none of the wisdom, embodied this hubris most dangerously. He had grown up on the tailies, often reenacting the humiliation with his friends using painted props and captive animals. If those lizard whelps couldn't handle a bit of fun, imagine how they'll scatter when real men ride against them, Cedric would sneer, his laughter ringing through the marble halls of the palace. But the winds of fate were shifting. Reports from border scouts spoke of strange omens, silver shadows gliding silently over moonlit peaks, sudden wildfires that burned with unnatural precision in human-logged forests, and storms that struck only military outposts while sparing villages. Whispers spread among the common folk, tales of dragons growing bolder, of patrols vanishing without trace, their armor found melted or shattered by lightning. The breaking point came on a crisp autumn morning when a Valorian mining caravan deep in disputed territory was obliterated. Witnesses, those few who survived, spoke of a silver dragoness descending like a falling star, her claws rending wagons to splinters while illusions made her seem to multiply into a dozen foes. A red behemoth followed, his roar shaking the earth as rivers of flame consumed the guards. And from the clouds above, a gray tempest unleashed bolts that danced with malevolent intelligence, striking powder kegs and turning the entire site into a crater of glass and ash. King Harlan dismissed the reports at first. Exaggerations from cowards, he growled in his war council, slamming a fist on the oak table. Maps of Eldrath lay spread before him, marked with invasion routes he had long dreamed of. Send more troops, double the bounties on dragon scales. We'll mount their heads on our walls and remind them who rules the lowlands. Yet as weeks turned to months, the incursions escalated. Dragon flights now openly patrolled the borders, their silhouettes black against the sun, daring human forces to advance. Villages loyal to Valoria reported sightings of the three great dragons, Myra with her haunting silver beauty, Thorn a blazing comet of destruction, Lurek a living thunderstorm circling high above, observing with eyes that seemed to pierce souls. In the Dragon Eyrie, the trio stood on the same obsidian plateau where their humiliation had begun. The air hummed with anticipation. Myra's voice was melodic yet edged with steel as she addressed the assembled host. They called us whelps. They marked us with their contempt. Today we show them what grows from such seeds. Her wings unfurled with a snap like thunder, scattering leaves and small stones. Thorn's flames licked at his fangs, his massive chest expanding with a deep, rumbling inhale that heated the surrounding air. I still taste the mud they threw me into. Feel the shame that burned hotter than any forge. No more hiding in the peaks. Valoria will learn that fire remembers. Lurek's horns crackled with nascent lightning, his gray form tense with coiled energy. The storms I summon now carry every tear we shed that night. They will wash away their arrogance in floods of regret. Vera and Korvath watched with solemn pride. Go with the council's blessing, the matriarch said, her amethyst eyes gleaming. Teach them the cost of cruelty, but spare the innocent. Dragons are guardians, not butchers. The dragon host took to the skis in a spectacle that would be etched into legend. Hundreds of winged forms rose as one, their wings blotting out the sun and casting the valleys into twilight. At their vanguard flew the three, silver, crimson, and stormgray, symbols of justice long deferred. The first major clash unfolded at the fortified town of Stonebridge, a key Valorian outpost guarding the approach to the mountains. King Harlan had reinforced it heavily, with ballistae lining the walls, mages chanting protective wards, and Prince Cedric personally commanding from the central tower. Banners of the Golden Lion fluttered defiantly in the breeze. As the dragons approached, alarms blared. Soldiers scrambled to positions, their faces pale beneath helmets. It's them, the ones from the old stories, a veteran sergeant muttered, recognizing the descriptions passed down from the plateau incident. Myra struck first, a blur of silver grace. She wove through the air with impossible agility, dodging volleys of iron bolts that whistled past her scales. Illusory duplicates of herself materialized, drawing fire while she closed in. Her claws, sharper than any sword, raked across the outer battlements, sending masonry crumbling and knights tumbling into the moat below. Remember the fruit that stained my scales, she called, her voice carrying like wind chimes forged in ice. This is the harvest. Thorn followed with earth-shaking fury. He dove like a meteor, wings tucked, and unleashed a cone of searing flame that engulfed an entire siege tower. Wood and steel melted into slag, screams rising briefly before being consumed. His roar shook the ground, causing horses to rear and throw their riders. You tripped me into filth and laughed, now feel the fire you mocked. Armored men ran in panic, their plate glowing red-hot before buckling. Lurek commanded the heavens. From the heart of a suddenly forming thunderhead, he directed arcs of lightning that lanced downward with pinpoint accuracy, exploding ballistae and frying entire companies where they stood. Winds howled at his command, whipping arrows off course and hurling soldiers from the walls like leaves in a gale. You painted weakness on my horns, today the storm paints your end. Rain lashed down in torrents, turning the battlefield to mud and chaos. Prince Cedric, watching from the tower, felt the first true stirrings of dread. His face, so like his father's in youth, drained of color. Archers, mages, bring them down. But his commands rang hollow as Myra snatched him mid-charge, plucking the young lord from his warhorse with gentle yet inescapable talons and depositing him, shaken but alive, before the broken gates. "Look upon us, son of Harlan," she hissed, her breath cool against his sweat-soaked face. "We were the bobbies you mocked. Are we still so small?" The town fell not to total annihilation but to overwhelming demonstration. The dragons targeted only the military structures and those who fought with zeal, leaving civilians cowering in cellars unharmed. As the survivors emerged, they beheld the three titans perched on the ruins, their eyes reflecting the fires below. Word raced back to Ironhold. King Harlan paced his throne room in fury and growing unease, his once mighty frame trembling. Messengers arrived breathless, describing the devastation. "They are no longer whelps, your majesty. They are vengeance given wings." Harlan slammed his goblet down, wine spilling like blood. "Mobilize the full army, call every vassal, we will meet them in open field and crush this rebellion." Yet deep in his heart, a cold sliver of doubt pierced the armor of denial. The same pride that had led to the plateau insult now whispered of impending doom. The dragons pressed onward, their campaign a measured symphony of power and mercy. Village after village witnessed the sky darken with wings, only for the beasts to demand reparations rather than slaughter, return of stolen crystals, oaths of non-aggression, public acknowledgement of past wrongs. Those who complied were spared, those who resisted faced targeted strikes that left no doubt of the cost. Through it all, Myra, Thorn, and Lurek moved as one unbreakable triad. Nights were spent in hidden glades, their massive forms curled together much as they had in the nest long ago. "Do you remember the tears?" Myra would ask softly, her silver tail draped over her brother's. Every night, Thorn would rumble, embers glowing in his chest. "But today we turn them to strength." Lurek's lightning would flicker gently, and tomorrow they will know regret deeper than any storm. As the dragon host closed in on the capital itself, the skies above Valoria grew heavy with thunder that was not mere weather. King Harlan stood on the battlements of Ironhold, staring upward in disbelief. His kingdom, built on mockery and expansion, trembled at the approach of three dragons who had once been nothing but humiliated bobbies. The air crackled with anticipation. The wheel of consequence, set in motion 2 decades earlier with rotten fruit and painted horns, was about to complete its terrible turn. Regret, long delayed, hovered just beyond the horizon, deep, profound, and inescapable. The skies above Ironhold, the proud capital of Valoria, churned with unnatural fury as the dragon host descended like a living eclipse. What had once been a clear autumn day, golden sunlight bathing marble spires, bustling markets, and the golden lion banners snapping in the breeze, now lay shrouded in twilight. Heavy thunderheads roiled overhead, pregnant with Lurek's summoned storms, while distant roars echoed like the heartbeat of an awakening giant. The air itself grew thick, charged with the metallic tang of ozone, the acrid bite of distant smoke, and the subtle, ancient musk of dragon scales carried on thermals from the mountains. King Harlan Voss stood rigidly on the highest battlements of the royal citadel, his once imposing frame now softened by decades of indulgence yet still clad in ornate plate armor etched with fatting golden lions. His silver-streaked beard trembled as he gripped the stone parapet, knuckles white. Below him, the city teemed with panic. Citizens fleeing into cellars, soldiers scrambling to man the walls, priests chanting desperate wards that flickered weakly against the gathering power. Messengers had brought word of the fall of Stonebridge, of villages humbled, of his own son Cedric returned shaken and pale from a silver dragon's talons. Harlan's heart, long armored in pride, now felt the first icy fingers of true dread. "They are coming," he whispered, voice hoarse, the whelps all grown. Beside him, his advisors shifted uneasily. General Merck, a grizzled veteran with a scarred face, cleared his throat. "Your Majesty, the outer defenses are reinforced. Ballistae, mages, the full royal guard. We can still." "Silence," Harlan snapped, though his eyes betrayed the lie. He remembered that day on the Obsidian Plateau with vivid, unwelcome clarity. The silver hatchling squeaking as rotten fruit splattered her innocent scales, the red one tumbling into mud with sputtering flames, the gray one's small horns daubed with mocking symbols. He had laughed then, toasted the lesson in human superiority. Now those same bobbies approached as titans, and the laughter had turned to ash in his mouth. High above, the three dragons led the vanguard. Myra soared at the forefront, her massive silver form cutting through the clouds with ethereal grace. Her scales shimmered like a river of liquid starlight, each one reflecting fractured rainbows as lightning danced nearby. Her sapphire eyes scanned the city below with cool intensity, not with blind rage, but with the measured sorrow of one who had carried humiliation like a hidden scar for 20 years. Her wings, vast and membranous, beat with rhythmic power, sending gusts that rattled shutters and toppled market stalls. "They built their empire on our tears," she murmured to her brothers through the wind, her melodic voice carrying the weight of ancient bells. "Today we offer them the mirror of regret." To her right, Thorn blazed like a comet forged in the heart of a volcano. His crimson scales glowed with inner heat, the air around him warping and shimmering as if reality bent before his fury. Scars from volcanic training crisscrossed his hide, dark badges that only accentuated his terrifying majesty. His golden eyes burned like twin suns, and with every exhale, faint wisps of plasma licked at his fangs. The stocky hatchling who had once been tripped and mocked now commanded flames that could unmake armies. "I still feel the mud clinging to my scales," he growled, voice a deep rumble that vibrated through the stones of Ironhold itself. "The laughter that tried to extinguish my fire. Let them taste what they kindled." Lurek completed the triad on the left, his storm-gray body a living thunderhead. Electric blue veins pulsed beneath his scales, and his majestic spiraling horns crackled with contained lightning. His wings rode the tempests he himself summoned, allowing him to hover with eerie stillness amid howling winds. The smallest and most sensitive of the three had become the avatar of elemental wrath, yet his heart still carried the echo of painted horns and whispered cruelties. "Every bolt I wield carries the sting of their brushes," he intoned, his voice rolling like distant thunder that shook window panes. "The storms will wash their pride away, but we choose mercy where it is earned." The dragon host, 100 strong, held position in disciplined formation, a wall of wings and scales that blotted the sun. They did not descend in mindless destruction. Vera's teachings echoed in every mind: guardians, not butchers. The innocent would be spared. The proud and cruel would face the consequences. The first strike was not fire or lightning, but a demonstration. Myra dove with breathtaking speed, her form a silver streak that seemed to multiply into illusory duplicates thanks to her mastered light weaving. Ballista bolts whistled upward, only to pass harmlessly through phantoms. She raked her claws across the outer curtain wall, not to slaughter, but to shear away entire sections of masonry in controlled fury. Stone crumbled like dry bread, sending knights tumbling into the moat with splashes and cries of alarm. "Remember the fruit that stained an innocent child?" Her voice rang out, clear and piercing over the chaos. "This is the weight of your jest returned." Panic rippled through the ranks. Soldiers loosed arrows that bounced uselessly off draconic scales harder than enchanted steel. Mages chanted frantically, their wards flaring and dying like candles in a gale. Thorn followed with cataclysmic force. He tucked his wings and plummeted like a falling star, unleashing a controlled cone of white-hot flame that engulfed a cluster of siege engines and supply wagons. Wood and iron melted into glowing slag, the heat so intense that nearby soldiers felt their armor grow uncomfortably warm before they fled in terror. His roar shook the ground, causing horses to rear and throw riders, banners to ignite spontaneously. "You laughed as I lay in filth, my flames mocked and drowned," he bellowed, the words laced with 2 decades of smoldering pain. "Now feel the fire you dismissed as harmless." Civilians watching from hidden vantage points gasped in awe and fear. Some whispered prayers, others recalled the old ballads of Harlan the Bold and felt the bitter taste of lies. Lurek remained aloft, orchestrating the heavens. With a tilt of his horns, lightning lanced downward in precise arcs, striking only military targets, exploding powder stores, shattering ballista frames, and electrocuting clusters of archers who had aimed at the dragons with particular zeal. Torrential rain followed, turning the streets to rivers of mud that hampered human movements while the dragons navigated the skis effortlessly. Winds howled at his command, whipping arrows astray and hurling shields from trembling hands. "You branded weakness upon my brow when I was small and trusting," his thunder voice echoed. "Today the storm judges the true cowards." Prince Cedric, watching from a reinforced tower with what remained of his father's inner circle, felt his knees weaken. The cocky young lord who had once reenacted the plateau jest with painted sticks now stared upward at the silver dragoness who had once been the pelted hatchling. Myra spotted him, swooped low with impossible precision, and much as she had at Stonebridge, plucked him gently yet inescapably from the battlements with her talons. She deposited the gasping prince at the feet of his father on the main citadel platform, unharmed but utterly broken in spirit. "Look upon us, Harlan," Myra said softly, landing with a grace that belied her size. Her massive silver form towered over the king, wings half-folded like a mantle of judgment. Her breath was cool and sharp, scented faintly of mountain frost and ozone. "We were the bobbies you humiliated with fruit and mud and paint. 20 years we carried those scars in silence. Now tell me, are we still so small and laughable?" Harlan stumbled backward, his crown slipping slightly on his sweat-slicked brow. Cedric crawled to his father's side, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. "Father, they remember everything, every laugh, every insult." The king's generals urged a final charge, but the fight had already drained from most. Common soldiers lowered weapons, eyes wide with the realization that these dragons could have razed the city in minutes yet chose targeted precision. Fires burned only where resistance was fiercest. Civilians remained untouched, sheltered by the very tempests that harried the military. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the clouds in hues of blood and gold, the three dragons gathered before the ruined throne room. Thorn's smoldering presence heated the air, Lurak's lightning crackled in restrained arcs, and Myra's silver radiance illuminated the scene like moonlight made flesh. King Harlan knelt amid the rubble of his once mighty hall, his armor dented, his pride shattered. The golden lion banners lay torn and soot-stained around him. "Spare my people," Harlan whispered, voice cracking like dry leaves, tears genuine unbidden welled in his aged eyes. "We were fools, arrogant, cruel fools. I humiliated you when you were innocent. I taught my son and my kingdom to mock what we feared. I built this throne on that sin. Forgive us, or at least do not make the innocent pay for my pride." Thorn leaned close, his golden eyes blazing yet holding back the inferno. Flames licked gently at his fangs as he spoke. "We felt every insult like a brand, the mud, the laughter, the helplessness. You chose cruelty because we were small. Now you kneel because we are not. Regret is a bitter wine, King, drink deeply." Lurak's horns sparked, his storm-gray form casting flickering shadows. "The storms I command carry every tear we shed that night in the nest. They could drown your kingdom, wash away every trace of your arrogance. But we remember our mother's words, dragons endure and dragons offer the chance to grow wiser." Myra, the silver heart of the triad, lowered her majestic head until her sapphire gaze met Harlan's directly. Her voice was soft yet resonated through the hall like a solemn vow. "We could end your line today, turn these spires to glass with fire and lightning, but vengeance without mercy is merely another form of the cruelty you showed us. Swear the dragon accord. Return every crystal and artifact stolen from our lands. Teach your children, truly teach them, that respect is the only true shield against scales and storm. Publicly acknowledge the wrong done to 3 innocent hatchlings. Uphold the peace or the skis will remember again." Harlan bowed his head until his forehead touched the cracked marble floor. Sobs racked his frame. "It shall be done. By the lion throne and all my blood we regret it. Deeply, profoundly, the stories will change. The mockery ends today." Cedric, still trembling, added his voice. "I grew up laughing at the tailies. I was wrong. Forgive my ignorance, great ones." As the dragons withdrew, the storm clouds parted. Sunlight broke through, bathing the humbled capital in gentle warmth. The dragon host did not pillage or conquer. They circled once in a final display of power and grace, then turned toward Eldrath. Myra, Thorn, and Lurak flew wing to wing, their massive forms casting harmonious shadows over the healed lands. In the years that followed, Valoria transformed. The Dragon Accord was etched into law, taught in every school alongside the old ballads, now revised to include the truth of the plateau, humiliation, and the mercy that followed. Children learned not to fear dragons, but to respect the power born from endured pain. Trade flourished with fairness, crystals flowed back to the peaks, and joint patrols ensured no orc or other threat rose unchecked. High in the family nest, the 3 guardians, now legends, curled together much as they had as hatchlings. Myra's silver tail draped protectively over her brothers, Thorn's inner heat warming the cavern, Lurak's gentle sparks lighting the crystals like stars. Vera and Korvath watched with quiet pride, the ancient matriarch murmuring, "Pain forges the strongest wings." Myra whispered into the peaceful darkness, her voice filled with hard-won peace. "They regretted it deeply, and in that regret both our peoples found wisdom." Thorn rumbled contentedly, a small, controlled flame dancing harmlessly. "The fire no longer burns for vengeance." Lurak's lightning flickered softly like distant fireworks, and the storms now bring rain that nourishes, not destroys. Outside, the winds of Eldrath sang an eternal song of balance restored. The humiliated dragon bobbies had become the architects of a wiser world, one where cruelty's seeds yielded not endless war but the rare and precious fruit of mutual respect. Empires rose and fell, but the memory of that lesson endured, carried on silver wings, crimson fire, and gray tempest across the endless skis. The wheel had turned fully. Regret had bloomed into redemption, and the dragons soared free, their laughter once replaced by tears, now echoing once more across the mountains, pure and unbreakable.